Section 4-2, Continental Drift. Now imagine for a second, what would it look like if South America was attached to Africa, attached to India, Antarctica, and Australia? Now all these continents were connected together. Think about what happened with animals that were living here, how they could roam from continent to continent that are now separated by oceans, but what if they weren't? Well, this is the idea that Alfred Wagner had in the early 1900s. He proposed the idea of continental drift, which stated that the continents were at one time all connected, that have been slowly drifting apart since then, so hence continental drift. He stated that about 300 million years ago, which scientifically speaking, we look at the age of the Earth as about 4.5, 4.6 billion years, according to evidence by rock layers and other processes. But about 300 million years ago, they formed the supercontinent Pangaea. And that slowly since then, the continents have been drifting apart. Now, he had evidence for his ideas. One was land features. He noticed the same exact land features separated by oceans, that the mountains on one side of the ocean matched up perfectly with the same rock types, same features as on the other side of the ocean. He found fossils of plants and animals that only could occur if the animals were all living in the same place, same time, but yet now we find these very far apart. He also found evidence of extreme climate change. Now, looking at this picture right now, you see all these colors represent different fossil, which relate to a very specific animal. This is the Sigmatheus, Triassic land reptile, approximately 3 meters long. Find the same fossil in South America into Africa. Find this land reptile here, all through Africa, Madagascar, into India, down to Antarctica. We find this fern all through Australia, Antarctica, and you see all these continents contain that fern. And then you see this little freshwater reptile here connecting South America and Africa. Now, first off, Antarctica, which we know as today as being barren and just covered with ice, having a fern, which indicates a warmer climate, and to find that fossil there has to indicate that one time Antarctica was warmer. Now, it was either warmer because our whole climate was extremely warm, or it was in another place. But we also find the same exact fossil in Australia and Africa. Now, that's only one plant species doesn't occur everywhere in the world. It only occurs in very specific parts of the world. And so to have these two land masses have the same exact fossil shows that they were connected at one time. And so we can easily see the puzzle piece that is South America and Africa, how they easily can be pushed together. I mean, even little kids can see this, how South America and Africa just seem like they fit. And this is one idea that really started Alfred Wagner on his ideas about continental drift. This was a lot of his evidence for this. I mean, the animal and plant species showing that there was extreme climate change in some areas, how the mountains lined up across oceans. And the only problem was he didn't have a mechanism for how. So the idea of continental drift never really did gain ground with a lot of scientists at the time because we had to have a good process for how this happened. I mean, yes, we have all this evidence which seems to match up perfectly, but how could this happen? How could the continents move apart? Wagner didn't have a good mechanism for motion, at least that was accepted at the time. That would come much later. We'll talk about that when we talk about plate tectonics. But this is what Pangaea would have looked like about 300 million years ago. You see North America here, North America, South America. Here's Africa. Here's Europe and Asia. And you see Antarctica here. And here's Australia here and India here. Now all these land masses were connected. And then slowly over time, we know North America went over here. South America shifted up here. Africa turned up here. India traveled a lot all the way up to here. Australia rotated, went down here, and then Antarctica shifted down here. And so those land masses all separated. Now, first off, these land masses are moving even today. We can measure this. It's not a whole lot. We're only talking sometimes about inches a year, but we can measure how much these continents now are moving apart. So the idea of continental drift actually was mostly correct. He just didn't have a good mechanism for it. And so that's why we don't talk about the theory of continental drift, because it wasn't supported, it didn't have enough evidence, it didn't fully explain things, didn't connect other things as well as we'd hope. But the theory we do use today is called plate tectonics. This is our little picture kind of showing from Pangaea to today. You can kind of see how they separated over time. Again, Wagner had a lot of evidence for this, had no good published mechanism for how, or no evidence for the how, and so that's why his idea really didn't gain traction until it was about 50, 60 years later, and we start seeing seafloor spreading and the idea of plate tectonics. But we'll get to that later.